There are some messages that arrive with a postmark, others that are delivered electronically, and still others that are carried by trembling lips in dimly lit rooms. For Thomas Martin, undertaker by trade and genealogist by obsession, he had begun to receive untraceable otherworldly messages that were of an unknown origin. They came from a place where no man has traveled, and perhaps to a place every man has planned on visiting. A place without roads, without borders, a place that existed without any logical explanation, a place 6 feet underground where Thomas Martin believed only the dead inhabited. That was until the occupants of that space acquired a cell phone and began communicating with him. After speaking with Emily Westbrook that prior evening, Martin verified the story she told him about the text message her client Melissa received on her cell phone from her deceased husband Mark. Melissa told Emily that Martin was also on the same text message chain. So as Martin sat at his kitchen table for breakfast, he checked his cell phone for the message. There it was, exactly as Emily described it. The message from Mark Casey, the firefighter who died saving strangers from a raging inferno. It was addressed to his wife Melissa and simply read, "How are you? Are the children doing okay? Love, Mark." Martin stared at the words. He had not known Mark Casey, had never met Melissa, had no connection to Mark beyond the headstone now standing in his backyard. Yet Mark's message arrived on his phone word for word as it did on Melissa's phone. Martin asked himself, by what means was that text message facilitated? To Martin, it was as though the dead were reaching out beyond personal boundaries with no respect for his individual privacy. Martin placed his phone beside his coffee, and that morning, Martin's meticulously buttered toast went uneaten. Martin's mind returned to the Harborview Cemetery where Harold Finch dug up graves of Martin's grandparents and found nothing but emptiness. Coffins gone, bodies gone, dates erased from stone with no chisel marks, no dust, no human interference. Martin had to find out what happened to his grandparents. Where did the coffins go? Where are their bodies? And wherever they were now, who facilitated their removal and perhaps even their transfer to another location? Martin had been receiving text messages from his deceased grandfather for the past several weeks. The text indicated that his grandfather knew about the backyard cemetery, that he knew of Emily, and perhaps even knew what took place at Thanksgiving dinner over a year ago. The 5 murders committed that Thanksgiving day entered Martin's mind like a lightning bolt. For if the dead knew exactly what had happened at the dinner table, then the dead were not merely communicating. They were watching, remembering, reporting, and they held the incriminating evidence. By noon, Thomas Martin had reached the only conclusion available to a man who could not tolerate uncertainty. The matter required a next step, an interrogation. He called Emily Westbrook. "I require your assistance," he said. "With what?" she answered. "A seance." There was a brief silence. "Mr. Martin," Emily said carefully, "I told you what seances are. They are performances." "Yes, then perform one," he said. "And whom are we pretending to contact?" "My grandfather." Emily exhaled. "You understand this won't work." "Nothing that has happened so far could ever have worked," said Martin. In order to appease him, Emily agreed to perform the seance in her home that evening. As usual, Thomas Martin arrived at Emily's home 20 minutes early, carrying a leather folder filled with questions. Emily led him not to the living room, but to her study. Her study had been transformed into something that looked all too familiar to Martin. Curtains drawn, candles lit, a round table placed at the center. The room faintly smelled of wax, dust, and incense. It was a stage, but then again, so was a morgue. So was a cemetery. So perhaps was life itself. Martin and Emily sat opposite each other. Emily folded her hands. She said, "Before we begin," and then, at that very instant, as though it was a preemptive strike, Martin's phone pinged. He looked down, same untraceable number. The message read, "Come join us, and all will be revealed." Martin did not move. Emily saw his face change. "What does it say?" she asked. He handed her his phone and showed her. And for the first time since he had known her, Emily looked genuinely afraid. "Is that an invitation?" Emily asked, "or is it an instruction?" Before Martin could answer, both Martin's and Emily's phones pinged again, this time simultaneously. Same untraceable number. New message. "Emily, you too are invited." The candle flames appeared to lean ever so slightly toward the table. Though no window was open, there was a faintly perceptible draft in the room. Emily picked up her phone with unsteady fingers. "How does it? I mean, how does he know me?" Martin's brow furrowed. "That is the wrong question, Emily." "Then what is the right one?" she asked. Martin replied, "It is how many of them know you, and for how long." Then the candle flames simultaneously bowed their heads again. Somewhere beneath the house, though Emily had no basement, she thought she heard the sound of wood creaking under weight, the sound of a coffin settling. "Did you hear that?" said Emily. Martin replied, "Hear what?" implying that Emily's imagination was playing tricks on her. In the moment, Emily let it go. Emily stood. "This is no longer academic." Martin rose as well. "On the contrary, it has only now become totally academic." Emily looked at him and said with conviction, "I want to go." Martin blinked. "Go where? To them?" "To whatever join us means," she said. "You understand the implications," said Martin. Emily said, "I understand enough to know that if the dead are communicating, then every religion, every branch of science, every lie I ever sold grieving people has been standing outside the same locked door." She looked down at her phone. "And now someone or something has just opened it. I owe it to my clients. I owe it to myself. I must go." Martin closed his folder. "I need some time to think about this," he said. He left without another word. And now it is time for us to take a brief respite to listen to an intermezzo conceived by world-renowned composer E. Dudek, after which the saga of Thomas Martin will resume. We continue. During Martin's short drive home, the town of Ashwick felt uncomfortably still. All that could be heard was the hum of streetlights above empty roads. Houses sat dark behind drawn curtains. At one particular intersection, about 1 mile from his home, beneath a traffic light, Martin thought he saw a figure of a man standing in a firefighter's coat, hat and boots, his face blackened by smoke. Martin hit the brake pedal, and in that instant, the figure disappeared. When he reached home, Martin did not enter through the front door. He went directly to his backyard. The cemetery waited beneath the moon. 42 headstones stood in silence. The 5 newest markers seemed subtly brighter than the rest, as though they had recently been recognized by the earth. Martin approached Mark Casey's stone. Beside it, the soil had lifted. Not broken, lifted, as though something beneath had pressed upward and then reconsidered. Martin knelt, placed his hand on the ground in front of it. The ground felt warm. From beneath the soil, Martin heard the sound of a faint crackle. Not roots, not insects. It sounded like rising flames. He withdrew his hand. Then another sound came, a child coughing, a woman whispering, a man's voice calling through smoke, "Tell Melissa and the children I love them." Martin drew back from Mark Casey's gravesite quite abruptly, and then from each of the newly erected headstones came murmurs. The wife who died of cancer, the son who overdosed, the child who too early in life succumbed to leukemia, the firefighter, Emily's father, voices overlapping in crowded darkness. Then Martin's phone pinged, another text. It read, "You created a station." Martin stared. Another message appeared. "You placed the names." Then another. "You laid the track." Another. "Now it is time for you to board." Martin felt the ground tremble beneath his feet. At the far edge of the cemetery where the old maple tree stood like a witness refusing oath, something appeared in the mist. Train rails. 2 black iron rails emerging from the earth, stretching between the headstones, vanishing into fog. Martin watched as a platform formed plank by plank beside them. Weathered wood, a hanging lantern, a sign. The letters burned slowly into existence. Conflation Station, Ashwick. For the first time in his ordered life, Martin felt the dreadful sensation of having completed someone else's or something else's design. A whistle sounded in the distance. His phone pinged once more. "Bring Emily." Martin looked toward town, then back at the platform, then at his own headstone where the date of his death remained unchanged, already deceased, already recorded. He understood then that this experiment had not summoned the dead. It invited a trip for those who are the living. Yet, according to his own headstone, Martin died a year ago. By midnight, Martin had recorded the day's events in his diary. By 1 a.m., he had packed a suitcase for a trip. By 2 a.m., he telephoned Emily Westbrook. "The next phase begins tonight. Pack a suitcase. Please come now. They are waiting." And then he hung up, and there they were, 2 steel rails gleaming beneath the moon, waiting for a train to arrive, beckoning him to leave. Thomas Martin, undertaker, genealogist, murderer, and the unwitting engineer of a train station no map would ever confess to identifying. A man who sought only to document death had now constructed a railroad terminal between 2 paradoxical worlds. There are those stations where trains arrive late, other stations where passengers arrive early, and one peculiar station where a traveler's ticket is engraved on a tombstone before the traveler even knows he has purchased passage. That train will now be boarding platform number 1, destination, the Conflation Station.